get started. You fall asleep before I get started, and I won't think I did you. What's the challenge in that?
This week, and I told him,
Who knows, I'm gonna play tomorrow.
he
Yeah.
was in Bojangles cold. But you said that, you said, "I'm not gonna stay there anymore. I need to do that."
Yeah.
He said, "Well, you know, that's instead of
Yeah.
really bad."
Yep. Yep.
So he came.
Yep. Thank you. Do it. All right, we're hot now. It ain't quite that late yet. All right, well, we're going and get started tonight. Rick, I'm sounding really, yeah. I'm used to hearing voices in my head, but not usually mine. All right. Hello. I'm still pretty. I'm better now, but I'm still a little bit hot. Turn me down a little bit or something. All right. So if you have your Bibles tonight, we are going to be in James chapter 4, verse 13. We finished up last week in verse 12, and then we flip-flop back to James chapter 4 tonight, and that is where we will be. Does anybody remember anything we discussed last week? Crickets. Last week, James, he addressed those that had taken advantage of their slaves, right? Their employers, by withholding their pay, right? And then last week, he encouraged those employers. Not the employers. He encouraged the slaves. He encouraged the employees with some thoughts. Does anybody remember any of those thoughts last week? Huh? To continue to work, certainly. You're going to let your yes be yes, your no be no. You know what I mean? Fulfill your contract, do what you said that you would do. That's right. We said how difficult that would be, how ironic that would be. You know what I mean? Someone's withholding your pay, and Jesus says, hey, still honor your yeses and your no's. You know what I mean? Still be there and do what you said you would do. Next year, find another job. That's me. That's not Bible. But anyway, anybody else? To be patient, right? To be patient. He told them to be patient, but to also be patient, looking for the coming of the Lord, right? And how could they endure such hardships and be patient and be at peace? Well, he reminded them, listen, the coming of the Lord, right? I think he said the coming of the Lord maybe is at hand, and then he also said that the Lord stands at the door. Right? So the Lord is coming back, right? And, our testimony, we should be doing the best we can to live out a testimony that honors God until we see the Lord come back, right? What was the other thing anybody remember what that other thing was that James told them last week? So keep their commitments, be patient. Then what was the other one? Oh, yeah, don't swear. Yeah, no need to swear, right? Just simply let your yes be yes and your no be no, right? He also told them to establish their hearts, right? Now, what does it mean? What does it mean to establish our hearts? Both Paul and James use these words, use that word establish. That word establish means to have a good foundation, to have a good, firm foundation, right? James was saying in the difficulties that you're facing, he didn't want their faith to be shaken. He wanted their faith to be strong. And the only way that their faith was going to be strong is if they established their hearts. Basically, they would be focusing on their spiritual life, focusing on their relationship with God, though they were going through this time of difficulty in this time of suffering. So, anybody went on vacation this year? Okay, I mean, I didn't know. You know what I mean? Some people. Anybody go on vacation last year? All right. Anybody plan on going on a vacation this year? Anybody handle going on a vacation tonight? Hey, I would. I ain't gonna lie, right? Yeah, I'm ready. That's right. Have you ever made plans to go somewhere? Maybe you made plans to go on vacation and things did not go the way that you wanted them to go or the way you intended them to go. Anybody got a story? Every vacation. Tommy says every vacation. You need to plan your vacations better.
You don't know the crowd.
Present company excluded, right? Anybody bad vacation? My dad, they were on the way to the mountains, right? And they were pulling their camper headed to the mountains, and the motor in his truck blew on the way to the mountains, right? He had to call a buddy to come pick his camper up and bring it back, right? $18,000 to put that motor back in his truck. Yeah, right? You're talking about a rough vacation. They ain't even got there yet, right? We went with some friends to the beach one time, and I went down there and checked out a beach house. We had a lot of friends. We were all going down there, going to be fishing together and just hanging out there. And we went down there and checked out the beach house. I explained it all to them, laid it all out, developed all the, this is how much it's going to be, blah, 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 blah. This person be in this bedroom, this person be in that bedroom. We got down to the beach, walked in one of the bedrooms, and it is raining in the bedroom. Yeah. Pipe had busted in the ceiling. Water was rolling through the ceiling, we got the water cut off. They got somebody over there, got it fixed. We did not use that bedroom, you know what I mean? Because it was just sopping wet. So we had to make some little adjustments. I made plans for another group of my friends to go down to the beach one time, and we had one of my buddies was in a wheelchair. And I lined up the hotel rooms, and I'm like, hey, listen, I got a guy in a wheelchair. We need one that's handicap accessible, right? Well, we got down there, and handicap accessible does not mean that it's on the ground floor, okay? There's a difference between being on the ground floor and handicap accessible. So my buddy ended up spending the night in his truck that first night while we were down there, right? We found a new hotel there the next night that had handicap accessible rooms. Today, we're going to look at some people, and they had formulated some great plans, right? And when I plan vacations, I formulate them. I try to put them together right. Well, they had planned some great plans, but they had not considered God's will in their plans. Some people have looked at these verses that we're going to look at tonight and argue that we should not make plans. Certainly, that is not the case. I believe it was Jesus that talked about, before you build a building, you consider the cost. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with making plans, but James sort of confronts these people tonight who were living and planning their lives as if they controlled their lives. And as we talked about with vacations, that we are not in control of our lives. I mean, we should do our best to plan, but ultimately God is controlled. Sometimes I think we as Christians, we make our plans, okay? And it could be going on vacation, it could be plans for retirement, it could be plans for ministry, right? Ministry that we're doing, right? And we make our plans, and then we're like, here it is, God. I made my plans, just need you to bless it, right? The problem is we got to consider God in our plans, you know what I mean? And consider God's will in our plans. And these that we're going to look at tonight, they had made some plans, not that there was anything wrong with their plans. Such city, we'll spend a year there, we'll buy, we'll sell, we will make profit. They had a plan to relocate for the purpose of financial gain. This was a business move. This was a business plan. They were not going on vacation. It's possible that these were some sort of tradesmen, I don't know what kind, iron workers, or, they had all kinds of tradesmen in this time as we do today. You know, maybe they've heard about a good city or a good town. You know what I mean? That maybe they're going through a big building project or something like that, and it's like, hey, listen, I have a skill that they can use. I can go there and make some money. So they're going to make a move for financial gain. They have narrowed the time down, have they not? What did they say? Today or tomorrow, right? They had nailed down the time. These were not just thoughts. Hey, you know what? One day I'd like to move out there to wherever. I got a buddy of mine just moved out to California a little over 2 years ago. Don't know what he was thinking moving out there. We were talking the other day about guns. He goes, yeah, I can't get one here. I said, you chose to move to California. But, you know, this wasn't one day I'd like to do this. This was today or tomorrow we are going to this city and we're going to make profit there. They were actively making plans. They had narrowed down a place, right? We're not going to any city. We're going to such and such city. They had narrowed down a place or places that they would go. They had made their plans and they had determined to go. They allowed their goals to dictate their decisions, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? You know, if you want to do this, if you have a goal there, then your decisions should be in line with that goal. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people think about retirement and stuff like that. You know, we put money in our retirement because one day we'd like to retire. You have guidelines that will ultimately result in your goals. At least you hope so. But the problem is they had determined their goals, they had determined that they were going, they had determined where they were going, but they had not asked God for His input. They had not showed a regard for God's will. And that'll become more clear as we continue reading through these verses tonight. Let's continue reading there in verse 14. James says, you know, we're going to this city, going to be there a year, going tomorrow, today or tomorrow, we're going to make some money. And James hits in verse 14. It says, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. All right? They said, we're going there. We're going to make some money. We're going this date. We're going to stay this long. James didn't say what they were doing was necessarily wrong, right? But he says, you don't know what tomorrow holds. What you ought to say is, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. And I've tried to sort of train myself to keep that in mind. You know, Lord wills, we will see you on Sunday morning, right? Lord wills, next Wednesday we will continue our study in James. It's clear from these verses that James is not teaching that planning is unspiritual. He makes no statement as to we should not plan at all. He's just challenging them to consider God's will in their plans. He challenged the readers to revise their plans and even for us to make plans in light of the Lord's will. He isn't saying don't go. He's saying if the Lord wills, then we will go and we will do this. Paul cautioned them that they cannot control the circumstances of what they might face in the future. So they must pursue plans made in light of God's will. In seeking God's will or seeking God's plans for our lives, we must be in prayer. Now, James didn't specifically say pray, you know what I mean, where if God would have you go to that city or not. He didn't say that, but he does say if the Lord wills, consult God. Certainly we cannot pursue the will of God. We cannot seek the face of God without prayer, right? Talking to God and also being in God's Word. Jesus, on at least 2 occasions, taught his disciples that prayer is not just about adoration. It's not just about praise. Prayer is not just about asking for things. Prayer isn't just about thanksgiving. But prayer is about being submissive to God's will. He says there in Matthew 6 and also Luke 11, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We should seek God's will on this earth. We should seek God's will in our plans. James was not speaking against planning. James was speaking against planning without praying, planning without seeking the will of God. James has challenged these believers here, and I think they were probably believers. Maybe not, I don't know, it's just a guess. But James was challenging these here to rethink or revise their goals. They were to pray to God about moving their trade. Pray to God about going to this new city with these new plans that they had. James was suggesting that they rethink if they should go. 1 Thessalonians 4, 9 through 12 says that we are to work hard so our testimony will be clear to all. James was not suggesting that they don't work. He was not suggesting that they don't work to provide money for themselves, because as we know, we'd have to have money to live. But he was saying, consider the will of God in your endeavors. I thought about these verses when I was studying this today. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, I'll read them so you don't have to flip to them if you want to make note of them. But Paul says, "But we command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you withdraw from every brother who walks disorderly and not according to the tradition which is received from us. For you yourselves now know how you ought to walk, for we are not disorderly among you." There's a plan. There's an order with God. We look at creation, right? God is a God of order, okay? Now, God doesn't have to plan and think through things to see how they're going to turn out. He doesn't have to do that. But God is a God of planning. God is a God of order. I mean, you look at the world around us. You look at nature. You know what I mean? God puts things in order. He has an order and a reason for things. Paul says, don't walk disorderly. Verse 8, "Nor did we eat anyone's bread free of charge, but worked with labor and toil and night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you." He's talking about the missionaries there and the pastors there, the ministers there. He said, we worked for our bread. "Not because we do not have authority, but to make ourselves an example of how you should follow us." Basically, Paul and the missionaries here, they were ministering to the people, and he said, we are working for you, we are working on your behalf, we are ministering to you, therefore we deserve to be fed and deserve to eat. He said, but we chose not to set an example for you. He said, "For even when we were with you, we commanded you this, if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat." We should be working to provide for ourselves and working to provide for our families. Certainly we should be working to provide for the work of the kingdom, to provide for God's kingdom and to see it expanded. So James wasn't by any means encouraging these people not to work, right? He was not encouraging them not to make money. He was saying, consider the will of God in all these things. And here clearly Paul says, if you don't work, you don't deserve to eat. These people needed to seek God's will in their plans because God desired that they enjoy all the good and perfect gifts that God wanted to give them. The Bible is very clear that God showers us with His blessings. All good things come from the Father above, in whom there is no guile. No evil. That was probably my translation of that verse, because I didn't have that one written down here. But you guys know what verse I'm talking about. God desires to bless His people, but you can tell from these verses that we read in James, their pursuit was for the promises of this world, right? The lucrative promises of this world. They were pursuing money, and once again, there's nothing wrong with that as long as we keep things in perspective. It's possible that these that were planning to go to this city and make profit maybe were some of these very ones that we read about in James chapter 5, that sort of got their priorities wrong, right? They started focusing on wealth and neglecting their fellow man. James wanted to change their thinking. He wanted them to understand that the will of God should be their number one pursuit, their number one priority. Moving was not an issue. They needed to seek the leadership of God's Spirit and seek to be in a place where He desired to use them. Like so many in the Bible, including Paul and James, there's nothing wrong making our decisions. But we need to make our decisions based on the will of God and the plan of God. And we need to understand that even if we come up with what we think is a solid plan and what we think of as a God-honoring plan, that God has a different plan in mind. Sometimes he does that, and he has the right to do that. I remember a number of years ago, Melody and Tommy, did y'all go with us to Louisiana? I don't remember. Y'all went with us to Louisiana? We went down there to Louisiana, down there at the orphanage there, and we had plans to go down there and do all these kind of projects, okay, at the orphanage. It was after Hurricane Katrina had come through, and we had all these projects that I went down there. I drove down there, scoped everything out, took pictures, you know what I mean, talked with the people down there. Okay, we're going to Louisiana. We're going to do all these projects. Mackie went with us. Oh, man, I can't think of the other guy that went with you. Yeah, Mike Yoder went with you. Took all these men down there. We're going on a mission trip. We took teenagers and men, and we're going to go down here and we're going to do all this work, right? We get down there, and we did a lot of planning. They had done no planning, okay? We did do some missions work down there, but we got down there. We had planned on spending a day with the kids at the orphanage, right, and playing some games with them and ministering to them a little bit. But then it was primarily going to be construction, right? And then we get down there, and there's nothing lined up for us to do construction. It wasn't anything on our part. It was on their part. But we found out that unless there was someone down there with these kids in the orphanage, then they were basically locked up in their rooms. Okay, they didn't get to get outside and do some things. So what did we end up doing? Well, we ended up revamping our plan. We basically would work part of the day, and the rest of the half of every single day we spent playing games with these kids. And we had to go get some game stuff and rethink the stuff and rework some. The few men that went down there to work and not play, we tried to keep them busy, you know what I mean? At least for half a day. You know, God, we thought we had a plan, right? And we thought it was a God-honoring plan, right? But we got down there and God changed the plan. We can't get mad at God. We just accept that this is God's plan, and it's His will, and we need to be obedient to His will, even when He changes our plans. Another concern of James's for these making plans was the matter of time. James, with the fact that we as people have no way of predicting what a day will bring about. Once again, I go into a plan of things I want to accomplish and things I want to do. How's your day? Been spinning my tires all day long, right? Getting nothing done that I felt like I should be doing. But James says, hey, listen, we have no way of predicting what a day is going to be about. The truth of the matter is we're not guaranteed to wake up the next morning. We are not guaranteed that the most carefully laid out plans will go as we have planned them. You know, I think about the story that Jesus told about the rich fool that had the bumper crop. Right? He's seeing the crops. He's seeing it's all coming together. Maybe they got just amount of rain, just amount of sun. You know what I mean? Maybe the I don't know what kind of crops they had. Maybe the corn cobs are abundant. You know what I mean? There's just ears and ears on the corn. He's like, wow, this is going to be a bumper crop year, right? So he says, I'm going to tear down all my barns, right? And I'm going to build bigger barns so that I can hold all that I am going to harvest. What was the problem with that? Huh? He hadn't harvested yet. Huh? Somebody tell me. He died. He died before he saw that harvest, right? He said, I'm gonna harvest all that. I'm gonna tear down these bigger barns. I'm gonna build these bigger barns. And I forget once again how the wording, but you know, you fool. You know what I mean? Tonight, your soul, you know what I mean, is required. I forget the way. I'm not even going to try to phrase it. But anyway, God told him, He said, listen, you're going to die. You know what I mean? You will not see this. You will not see this harvest. What was the problem there? He was focusing on the temporal. He was plan for temporal things rather than plan for those things which are eternal. But the truth of the matter is we are not guaranteed tomorrow. James reminds us that our life is a vapor, that it appears and then it is gone. In verse 15, James makes it clear that we should first consider if it is the will of God for us to live and pursue our plans. Secondly, if it is God's will for us to do this or that. I believe James was possibly suggesting to these people that had these plans to go into another city that maybe they were to stay where they were. Maybe he's saying, hey, listen, I don't know that it's God's will for you to go to that city. Maybe it's God's will that you stay here, minister here, serve here. Then again, maybe God was saying, hey, listen, I got a whole nother different direction for you to go, and certainly that is also God's prerogative. Let's continue reading there in verse 16 and 17. James says, but now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. James uses two words to sort of describe their sin. The first is that of boasting. Okay, the word boasting there is the word rejoicing. It means to take glory in something, to take glory in something, to take pride in something, to look back and say, look at what I have done. God uses us to do some miraculous things that bring glory and honor to God. But there's not a one of us that has the right to stand up and say, look what I have done. Right? It's okay to say, look what God has done through me. Right? They were warned not to be boastful, not to glory in themselves. The second word that he uses there is arrogance. What is arrogance? Arrogance is a person trusting in their own power, a person trusting in their own resources. Right? I've got what I need to do this plan. I've got what I need to go to this city and make great gain there. Arrogance finds stability in earthly things. This could also be considered a false pride. James was very blunt. He was very direct. This boasting in your arrogance, he said, also evil. Many people in the Bible and even people today boast in their own wisdom. We value our wisdom over God's, and in doing that, we put ourselves above God, right? James has kind of made that clear a couple times as we've been moving through this book. When we trust in our own wisdom, we put ourselves above God. We can behave as if we are all-knowing, and as if we are all-powerful. We can behave like we have planned perfectly for that vacation, but we most likely have not planned for it to be raining when we get to that hotel room, right? We act many times as if we are in control of all our own affairs, and James says we are not. As Christians today, we need to take advantage of the warnings that James gives us. We must make plans within God's will. James' readers could right their own wrongs. He says, listen, you made these plans, but he says, really what you need to do is make these plans and say, if God wills, we will do these. They had an opportunity to redo things. They could continue their pursuit for future things, or they could stay and remain whatever the will of God might be. We must seek God's will in the present. We must seek God's will in the future. We must make our plans in light of God's revealed will. I found this quote, and I have no idea where I found it from. I did not come up with it, I'm sure. It said that when we make our plans, we should make our plans in Jell-O rather than cement. In Jell-O rather than cement. Jell-O, we got a little bit of wiggle room, right? Wiggle, Jell-O. Y'all like that, didn't you, right? If you got wiggle room in cement, there's a problem, right? Especially after it's set up, right? Make our plans. Plan on God doing His thing, and be ready to accept God's will and not get bent out of shape, right? When God changes our plans. I tell people a lot of times you just roll with the punches, right? And they're not punches from God, right? But you roll with God's plans. You roll with the, I think, Christmas curveballs, right? You roll with those curveballs that God throws you, right? Verse 17, Melody reminded me today, she said, that's one of your favorite verses, and I really don't have a whole lot to say about it tonight because it's pretty much straightforward. Verse 17, therefore to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Right? And I know many times I have sat across the table from men, and I've sat across the table across the campfire with men, and they'll be going through something, and I'll say, do you know what God would have you to do? Blah, 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 blah. I said, if you don't do that, then it is sin. If you know God's will, you know what God would have you do, and you choose not to do God's will, that is sin, right? That can be in our relationships with our husbands and our wives, with our coworkers. You know, it can be in our future plans, right? It could be in our future. You know, we get sometimes I think that ministries flop because we don't consider God's will. We don't consider what God wants. You know, we look at something and we say, you know what, I'll do this and it'll be a great thing, right? And a lot of times we're focusing on us, right? Well, if I do this great thing, then everybody will look at me and give me a pat on the shoulder and give me an applaud, right? If that's our attitude going into things, we're going to fall flat on our faces, right? The Bible tells us, you know, what pride comes before the fall, right? Pride comes before. Any comments on tonight before we get into our prayer time? Any comments tonight before we get into our prayer time? All right, y'all all for quiet. All right. And then we moved on to 5. We skipped back to 4.